This weekend, Ghostbusters Afterlife finally hits theaters. It's a continuation of the continuity of the original two Ghostbusters films, and it's directed by the son of the director of the original Ghostbusters. So let's talk about it. After Egon dies, his estranged daughter and grandchildren move into his home, and strange things begin to occur. Now, I'm a lifelong Ghostbusters fan, and in fact, Sean Chandler talks about started because my wife and I went on a date to go see Ghostbusters 2016, and the next day I was like, hey, I should shoot a review for that, and it turned into a whole new career path for me. So to state the obvious, Ghostbusters is a big part of my life. And when they announced they were doing a new film in the continuity of the original two films from Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, I just thought that was a great idea. It was in my top 10 most anticipated films of this year. In fact, it was also in my top 10 most anticipated films of last year. But before I let you know what I thought about it, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about Ghostbusters Afterlife? And if you haven't seen it yet, what's your excitement level? And also kind of give a point of reference. Since Ghostbusters is almost 40 years old now, it's kind of one of these multi-generational franchises. So kind of that point of reference of kind of how old you are helps to understand the conversation, and Ghostbusters means different things to different age groups. With that said, let's get started with the good. And to be very clear, right from the get-go, I thoroughly enjoyed this film.
That's great!
To me, this is exactly what they needed to do with the franchise. It's a new story and a new type of story, as it's about a family and kind of children take the lead in this story, but it delivers all the Ghostbustery things that you want in a Ghostbusters movie. As you can see from the trailers, it builds on the mythology of the previous Ghostbusters films. So you see some familiar faces, familiar ghosts. There's lots of Easter eggs in here, but it's a new story, a different story that continues the legacy of these characters. The original Ghostbusters was about a group of middle-aged scientists who start a business hunting ghosts in New York City. This movie is about a single mother who moves to a small town after her father dies, and strange things start occurring. There's plenty of Easter eggs. There's plenty of returning faces that we've seen before. There are continuing plot threads, but obviously it's something new and different with the franchise. Honestly, what I think the movie does perfectly is balancing feeling fresh and new and familiar, and it just does a great job of blending those two things together. Of course, it's a Ghostbusters movie, so you gotta talk about the comedy. And while in a lot of ways the comedy here is very different from the original Ghostbusters, it continues in the vein of the original in that the comedy feels organic based off the batch of characters rather than a bunch of obvious setups and punchlines and slapstick comedy and things like that. No, it's very organic and tied to the characters. So like our lead character here, our little new mini Egon, is this awkward, nerdy 12-year-old girl who sometimes she's funny because she's so smart and catches people off guard. Other times she's funny because she's delivering these nerdy jokes in this very specific stunted way that's perfect for who her character is, but it's funny in that regards. Of course, you also have Paul Rudd, who's doing his usual stick that I think fits very nicely into the world of Ghostbusters because he's so effortlessly amusing and funny in his little reactions, his little quips, his responses to things, his comedic timing. It's all exactly on point without needing to go broad or overcook the humor. Of course, you also have Finn Wolfhard in the film, who's great with a little bit of sarcasm, the little quips here and there. Along these same lines, one of the reasons this movie works is because of the cast that they pulled together. Paul Rudd, of course, is a great leading man that, as I just mentioned, fits great into this franchise, but he's not really the standout or the star here. Finn Wolfhard has made a name for himself over the last 5 years for stealing a bunch of scenes in Stranger Things and It. Once again, he's not the standout or the star here. They're both great, But the star and the standout is McKenna Grace here, who just perfectly embodies this little girl who's a mini Egon, who's trying to discover herself. She can be funny when she needs to be, but she's also the character that has this arc as this little girl that's never felt like she's fit in or understood who she was, and through this journey that she's on, discovers that there's a family member that was a lot like her that she never got to know. And that kind of provides multiple different sequences in the film where she kind of brings the dramatic chops to this film and she gets angry, she gets sad, she's heartbroken, and she does all of it in an entirely believable fashion. She is very good in this film. And without going into any specifics, there are some classic characters that do return in this film. And while they do get some great moments, the movie never uses them as a crutch. The new cast are the stars that make the choices that make things happen. And some of the classic characters are used as a nice spice to kind of just take things to the next level. It's great to see some of these faces, but the movie trusts its current new cast. And finally, this is easily the most emotional film in the entire franchise. Granted, the previous 3 films weren't exactly trying to be emotional, so the bar's not that high, but this is a movie that has a very strong emotional core from beginning to end. As it's a story about a family, it's about the death of a family member. That just kind of, it runs throughout the entire current of the film. It kind of informs the family dynamics and everything kind of taking place. And so there's deep emotions all throughout the entire film. And especially in the second half, there's some scenes that just tug at the heartstrings. There's one sequence where people in my theater started crying, and I probably would have started to cry, but I went to go see it with my brother-in-law, and there's no way that I'm gonna start crying in front of my sister's husband. So I was able to hold it together.
Everyone that has seen it says that they cry at the movie, so it should be an extremely successful comedy.
This is the sequel continuation that I wanted. I kicked off the year by saying this was one of my most anticipated films of the year, and I'll probably end the year with this in my top 10. But we do have to talk about a few more things, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. And the big thing here is that the nostalgia, the Easter eggs, the familiar faces might come off as just fan service to some people. But that's the nature of those types of elements. Some people absolutely love that you put in the stuff that they absolutely wanted to see. Others feel that that's pandering. For me, I ate it up. I loved it. Likewise, in the third act, towards the very end of the film, they really go for it in a way that some people might not like. Once again, it absolutely worked for me, and it worked apparently for most of the people in the audience that I saw the film with. Final thing here, there is a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. Both of them are something worth checking out. From there, let's move on to the bad. And to be perfectly clear, I did love this film, so these weren't things that really detracted from my enjoyment, but I am trying to be a bit objective here. First thing that comes to mind is that it does drag a little bit in the middle. It takes a while for the plot to really kick in. I mean, it spends time establishing the characters in this city. So for some people, it might take too long before it kind of goes into high gear. Second thing that comes to mind here, there's a few scenes where they're trying to reference something from the original film that just felt tonally off from everything else that was kind of going on. In particular, there's one scene with Paul Rudd, 60-70% of the way through the film, that I just don't think matched the tone of this particular film. So there's just a couple things like that just felt a little bit off. Real quick before I give you my final score, remember to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about Ghostbusters Afterlife? Or if you haven't seen it yet, what's your kind of excitement level? And give me that point of reference. How old are you? Have you been watching Ghostbusters since it came out in the 80s? Or were you born in 2005 and you're kind of brand new to this franchise? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, I posted a review of the original 1984 Ghostbusters over on my second channel, kind of going into all my thoughts on the movie. And I also did a fun little intro with my daughter on that one. So please check that one out once this video's done at this card right up here. This movie did exactly what I wanted it to do, plus more. It continued the story in a way that made sense while delivering the laughs and spooks that the franchise is known for, but it also delivered a lot more emotion than I expected. I thought it was great. Overall, I'm giving this one an A on the entertainment scale, a 9.5, and I would say it's a must-see movie. If you enjoyed this review, I also reviewed the original Ghostbusters. You can check it out right over there. Also, come back this weekend. I'm going to rank all the Ghostbusters films. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.